Save me. 3 times a day, gasped the trembling black woman as she collapsed at the weathered rancher's boots, clutching a mysterious leather satchel against her chest. The townsfolk sneered with familiar cruelty. Another runaway who'd be dragged back to the giant cattle baron's compound within hours, broken and forgotten like all the others. The weathered rancher, haunted by 8 years of isolation since failing to save his own wife, saw something different flickering behind her desperate eyes. What he didn't know was that the satchel contained documents that could destroy the most powerful man in the territory, evidence the cattle baron would kill for. But the woman's 3 times daily promise wasn't what it seemed, and neither was she. As riders appeared on the distant horizon, dust clouds marking their approach, one question burned. Would the rancher's protection be enough when the truth about her identity threatened to ignite a war that could consume them all? Before we continue, comment where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will publish a story there. The leather satchel hit the dusty ground first. Then Naomi Baines collapsed beside the ranch well, her dark skin burned raw by the Arizona sun. Blood crusted her wrists where rope had cut deep. Her lips cracked as she whispered the same words over and over. Save me 3 times a day. Morning, noon, night. I'll earn my keep. Gideon Blackwood set down his water bucket. 8 years of solitude had taught him to recognize desperation. The woman's clothes were torn, her hair matted with desert sand. But her grip on that satchel never loosened, not even unconscious. He carried her to the shade of his porch. Cool water brought her around. "Josiah Grant," she gasped. "He'll come for me." Gideon's jaw tightened. Every rancher within 50 miles knew that name. Grant owned half the territory and claimed the other half belonged to him too. "What did you do?" "I said no." Naomi struggled to sit up. "He wanted to marry me, settle my father's debt. I ran." The story came in broken pieces. Her father had owned a small mining claim up in the hills. Good land, decent silver deposits. When he died last month, Grant appeared with papers claiming the debt exceeded the land's value. Marriage would clear everything. "He gave me 3 days to decide." Her voice steadied. "Left me tied to a cross in the desert to think it over." Gideon studied her face. Most people broken by 2 days without water stayed broken. This woman's eyes held fire. "I need supplies," he said. The ride to town took 20 minutes. Doc Fletcher's office sat above the general store, accessible by outside stairs. Gideon climbed them with bandages and laudanum in his saddlebags. "Heard you found something in the desert." Fletcher didn't look up from his medical bag. "Word travels fast. She needs care. Grant's been asking questions. Seems he's missing some property." Gideon's hand dropped to his gun belt. "She's not property." Fletcher finally met his eyes. "That's a dangerous opinion around here. Grant owns the bank, the newspaper, half the businesses on Main Street. Sheriff Timmons tries to keep the peace, but there's only so much one man can do." "What aren't you telling me?" The doctor moved to his window, peering through the curtains. "Her father didn't just own any mining claim. He found silver. Real silver. The kind that makes men kill for it." Gideon felt something cold settle in his stomach. "Grant needs legal claim to that land. Marriage makes everything proper and binding." Fletcher turned back. "If she won't marry him, she's got no value alive." The ride home felt longer. Gideon found Naomi sitting on his porch steps, clutching that leather satchel like a lifeline. She'd cleaned herself up using his wash basin. Her torn dress was mended with careful stitches. "You're handy with a needle." "My father taught me to fix what's broken." She stood as hoofbeats echoed across the valley. "That'll be Grant." 6 riders approached in formation. Josiah Grant rode in the center, a mountain of a man whose shadow stretched longer than his horse's. His clothes were clean, expensive. His smile was not. "Blackwood." Grant's voice carried the authority of absolute power. "You found something of mine." "I found a woman asking for help." "That woman belongs to me. Legal debt, legal claim." Naomi stepped forward. "I don't belong to anyone." Grant's smile widened. "Your father thought different when he signed those papers." 48 hours, Blackwood. Return my property or face the consequences. And if I refuse? Ask the Morrison family. Oh, wait, you can't. They left town yesterday after their barn burned down. Terrible accident. The riders wheeled their horses and galloped away, leaving dust and the stench of threat hanging in the air. He'll kill you. Naomi's voice was steady, matter-of-fact. Maybe. Then why help me? Gideon looked out over his ranch. 8 years ago, his wife Sarah had died in childbirth, bleeding out while he stood helpless. The baby followed her within an hour. He'd replayed that night 1,000 times, imagining different outcomes, better choices. Because I couldn't save her. That night, Naomi insisted on cooking dinner. She moved through his kitchen like she belonged there, turning salt pork and beans into something approaching edible. They ate in silence as darkness settled over the ranch. About what I said earlier, Naomi set down her fork. 3 times a day. I meant it. You don't owe me anything. It's not about debt. Her fingers traced patterns on the wooden table. It's about staying alive long enough to make Grant pay for what he did to my father. Gideon studied her face in the lamplight. There was steel beneath the exhaustion, calculation behind the gratitude. What's in the satchel? For the first time since he'd found her, Naomi smiled. It was sharp as a blade. Everything. Grant doesn't want anyone to see. She opened the leather flap, revealing neat stacks of papers covered in precise handwriting. Survey maps, land deeds, witness statements, 3 years of documentation. Documentation of what? Every illegal thing Josiah Grant has done to steal land in this territory. Her smile grew wider. My father wasn't just a miner, Mr. Blackwood. He was a surveyor, and he taught his daughter everything he knew about reading the land and the law. Outside, coyotes howled in the distance. 46 hours until Grant returned. Dawn broke cold across the valley. Naomi spread her father's documents across Gideon's kitchen table like battle plans. Maps, surveys, and witness statements covered every inch of scarred wood. First meeting, she said simply. Gideon poured coffee and studied the papers. The handwriting was precise, methodical. Numbers and measurements filled the margins. Property boundaries were marked in red ink. Your father documented everything. For 3 years. Every illegal land grab, every forged deed, every family forced out. Naomi's finger traced a survey line. Grant's been stealing claims across 5 counties. Uses the same method every time. She pulled out a thick folder. Inside were copies of loan documents, all bearing the same terms. Impossible interest rates, accelerated payment schedules, collateral clauses that seized entire properties for minor defaults. He loans money to struggling miners and ranchers. When they can't pay, he takes everything. The courts always side with him because he owns the judges. Gideon studied a map showing Grant's accumulated holdings. The pattern was clear. Every seized property contained valuable resources. Silver deposits, water rights, strategic grazing land. How did your father gather all this? He surveyed land for the territorial office, had access to official records, mineral assessments, boundary disputes. Naomi sorted the papers into neat stacks. Grant never suspected a black surveyor was documenting his crimes. The morning meeting revealed the scope of Grant's operation. The noon session would focus on strategy. By midday, they had identified Grant's weaknesses. His empire depended on legal legitimacy. Forged documents and bribed officials created vulnerabilities that proper evidence could exploit. We need witnesses, Naomi said. People willing to testify about what Grant did to their families. They're all gone, dead, driven out, or too scared to talk. Not all of them. She pulled out a list of names. 17 families lost land to Grant in the past 2 years. I know where some went. Gideon recognized several names. Good people, honest ranchers who'd simply disappeared one day. He'd assumed they'd given up and moved on. The Hendersons settled near Tucson. The Williams family went to California. The Kowalskis are in Colorado. Naomi's planning was methodical, thorough. If we can reach them, get their stories documented properly, we'll have enough evidence to bring to the territorial authorities. Grant won't let us ride out of here alive. Then we don't let him see us leave. She spread out a topographical map. Red lines marked Grant's patrol routes, based on 3 years of her father's observations. Blue lines showed alternate paths through the mountains and desert. You know this country, she said. Every trail, every water source, every place to hide. Gideon studied the routes. His 8 years of isolation hadn't been wasted. He'd explored every canyon and ridge within 100 miles. Old cavalry habits died hard. There's a path through Devil's Canyon that Grant's men don't know about. Apache Trail, narrow but passable. How long to reach Tucson? 4 days hard riding, 6 if we stay hidden. The evening meeting cemented their alliance. Naomi revealed more of her capabilities as they planned the journey. She could read survey instruments, navigate by stars, and calculate precise distances between landmarks. My father said knowledge was the only thing they couldn't steal from us. She traced their route on the map. He taught me everything: surveying, bookkeeping, land law, mineral assessment. Why didn't he use this evidence while he was alive? He tried. Grant has judges in his pocket, sheriff's deputies on his payroll, newspaper editors who won't print stories that displease him. Naomi folded the maps carefully. My father needed someone with authority to listen, someone outside Grant's influence. The territorial governor? Or the federal marshal? Grant's operation crosses state lines now. That makes it a federal matter. They worked until midnight, organizing documents and planning their route. Naomi's efficiency impressed Gideon. She thought 3 steps ahead, anticipated problems, prepared contingencies. "You're not what I expected," he said finally. "What did you expect? A victim needing rescue." Naomi's smile was sharp. "I needed someone with local knowledge and military experience, someone Grant couldn't buy or intimidate." She gathered the papers back into her satchel. "You needed someone with evidence and legal knowledge to make the fight worthwhile." So, the 3 times a day meetings? Strategy sessions, morning for planning, noon for intelligence review, evening for operational updates. Her expression grew serious. "I won't lie to you, Mr. Blackwood. This is dangerous. Grant has killed people for far less than what we're attempting." "Why trust me?" "Because you could have turned me over to Grant yesterday and collected a reward. Instead, you gave me shelter and listened to what I had to say." Outside, wind rattled the windows. Somewhere in the distance, a horse whinnied. Both of them froze. "Company," Gideon whispered. He moved to the window, rifle in hand. 4 riders circled the ranch house, close enough to see but far enough to avoid gunfire. They made no aggressive moves, just watched. The IE message was clear. "Grant's keeping us under observation," Naomi said. "How do we get past them?" "We don't. We go under them." She showed him a section of the map he'd never noticed before. A narrow canyon that started near the ranch's eastern boundary and connected to the Apache Trail system. "My father used it to avoid Grant's patrols. The entrance is hidden behind that rock formation near your east pasture." Gideon studied the route. It was possible, barely. They'd have to move at night, travel light, and hope Grant's men didn't discover the trail. "When do we leave?" "Tomorrow night, after the next evening meeting." Naomi secured her satchel. "By then, I'll have everything organized for presentation to the territorial authorities." The riders maintained their vigil until dawn, then melted away into the desert. Grant was making his presence known without violating the 48-hour deadline. Time was running short. The hidden canyon proved narrower than expected. Gideon led his horse through gaps barely wide enough for the saddle. Naomi followed, her father's satchel secured across her chest. They'd left the ranch at midnight, using storm clouds to mask their movement. "Your father knew this country well," Gideon whispered. "He mapped every hidden trail between here and Mexico. Said a smart man always keeps 3 ways out of any situation." The canyon opened onto a mesa overlooking the Henderson Ranch, or what remained of it. The house stood empty, windows boarded, corrals broken, but smoke rose from the bunkhouse chimney. "Someone's still here," Naomi observed. They found old Tom Henderson repairing fence posts behind the barn. His weathered face cracked into surprise when he recognized Gideon. "Thought you were dead," Henderson said. "Grant's been telling folks you had an accident." "Not yet," Gideon dismounted. "We need to talk." Henderson's story matched the documents. Grant had approached him with a loan offer during a hard winter, generous terms, reasonable payments. 6 months later, the terms changed. Interest rates doubled overnight. Payment schedules accelerated. "He said I'd miscalculated the original agreement." Henderson spat in the dust. "Had papers to prove it, all legal and proper. When I couldn't pay, he took everything." "Everything?" "House, land, cattle, horses. Left me the bunkhouse out of Christian charity." Henderson's voice turned bitter. "Even took my wife's grave marker. Said it wasn't included in what I could keep." Naomi documented Henderson's testimony with the same precision her father had used. Questions about dates, amounts, witnesses present during conversations. She recorded everything in neat handwriting. "You're William Baines' daughter," Henderson realized. "Heard about what happened to him." "What did you hear?" "Found dead in his mine shaft. Grant said it was an accident. Cave-in from unstable rock. But your father knew mining better than any man in the territory." Naomi's hand never stopped writing, but Gideon saw her jaw tighten. "Will you testify against Grant?" she asked. "To who?" "He owns every judge from here to the territorial capital." "Not the federal authorities." Henderson considered this. Grant's reach was vast but not infinite. Federal jurisdiction meant different rules, outside oversight. "If you can guarantee protection for what's left of my family, yes." They spent 2 hours documenting Henderson's case. Loan documents, payment records, correspondence with Grant's lawyers. Naomi cross-referenced everything against her father's surveys, proving Henderson's land contained valuable mineral deposits Grant had known about in advance. "He targeted you specifically," she concluded. "The loan was never meant to be repaid." The pattern repeated across 3 counties. The Williams family had fled to California after Grant seized their ranch for a defaulted grain loan. The Kowalskis lost everything when Grant called in a note 6 months early, claiming a technicality in the payment schedule. Each family told the same story. Reasonable terms that became impossible overnight. Legal documents that changed between signing and enforcement. Judges who refused to hear appeals. 27 families in 2 years, Naomi calculated as they rode toward their third witness. Over 40,000 acres of mineral-rich land transferred to Grant through fraudulent loans. How much is that worth? Conservative estimate, $500,000, maybe more if the silver deposits are as rich as my father believed. They reached the Morrison place at dawn. The ranch house was a blackened ruin, still smoldering 3 days after the fire. Jake Morrison sat on a tree stump, staring at the destruction. "They came at night," he said without looking up. "Said it was an accident, but the flames started in 4 places at once." Morrison's story was different. He'd never borrowed money from Grant. His family had owned their ranch for 15 years, free and clear. But Grant wanted their water rights. He made an offer. "Fair price," he said. "I refused." Morrison gestured at the ruins. "Next thing I know, my barn's burning and my cattle are scattered across 3 counties. "Did you report it to Sheriff Timmons?" "Course I did. He said there wasn't enough evidence to prove arson. Suggested I take Grant's offer before something worse happened." Naomi added Morrison's testimony to her growing file. This case was different from the others. No fraudulent loans, no legal technicalities, just intimidation and destruction of property. "Grant's getting bolder," she observed, "less concerned about maintaining legal appearances." The morning's work revealed the scope of Grant's operations. 27 documented cases of fraud, 15 instances of intimidation, 8 suspicious deaths ruled accidental by corrupted officials. "Your father wasn't the first to die for opposing Grant," Gideon realized. "No, but he might be the last, if we do this right." They made camp in Devil's Canyon, hidden from Grant's patrols. Naomi organized her evidence while Gideon scouted their back trail. No pursuit yet, but that wouldn't last. "How long before Grant realizes we're gone?" He'll check the ranch tomorrow morning. When we don't show up for his deadline, he'll start hunting. Naomi spread out a territorial map. Red pins marked Grant's known properties. Blue pins showed the locations of his victims. The pattern formed a rough circle around the richest mineral deposits in Arizona territory. He's been planning this for years, she said. Systematic acquisition of every valuable claim in the region. What's the endgame? Control the territory's mineral wealth. With enough silver, he could buy politicians, judges, even territorial governors, make himself untouchable. A distant rumble made them both freeze. Hoofbeats echoed off canyon walls, coming from the direction of the ranch. "How many?" Naomi whispered. Gideon counted the sounds. 8 riders, maybe 10. Grant had discovered their escape sooner than expected. The hunt was beginning. How long to reach the territorial capital? 5 days hard riding. 3 if we kill the horses. And how long before they catch us? Gideon studied the canyon walls, calculating distances and defensive positions. His old cavalry training kicked in automatically. Depends how badly Grant wants us dead. Naomi secured her satchel and checked her rifle. Badly enough to burn down a ranch and kill a family. Badly enough to murder my father. The hoofbeats grew louder. The pursuit lasted 3 days through broken desert terrain. Gideon's cavalry experience kept them ahead of Grant's men, but barely. Sleep came in 2-hour intervals. Water ran low. The horses showed signs of exhaustion. On the 4th morning, Gideon collapsed while saddling his horse. "Just need a minute," he gasped, but his hands shook uncontrollably. Naomi caught him as he stumbled. Dark circles ringed his eyes. His skin felt clammy despite the desert heat. 3 days of constant vigilance and physical stress had pushed him past his limits. "You're done," she said firmly. "Grant's men are 6 hours behind us, maybe less. Then I'll handle Grant's men." She helped him into the shade of a rock overhang, then began breaking camp with efficient movements. Her father's survival training in the silver mines had prepared her for situations like this. Water conservation, shelter construction, route planning under pressure. "There's a trading post 20 miles north," Gideon mumbled. "Old Army supply station." "I'll find it." Naomi loaded their supplies onto her horse and helped Gideon mount behind her. His weight slumped against her back as fever took hold. She navigated by sun position and landmark recognition, skills learned during countless surveying expeditions with her father. The trading post materialized from heat shimmer like a mirage. Adobe, walls, corrugated roof, a hand-painted sign advertising supplies and ammunition. The proprietor, a grizzled ex-soldier named Murphy, took one look at Gideon and prepared a cot in the back room. "Heat exhaustion," Murphy diagnosed. "Seen it plenty during the Apache campaigns. He needs rest, water, and time. We don't have time." Murphy studied Naomi's dust-covered clothes and determined expression. "What kind of trouble you running from?" "The kind that burns down ranches and kills families." He asked no more questions. Frontier courtesy demanded sanctuary for those fleeing violence. Murphy barricaded the doors and positioned rifles at strategic windows. "Trading posts been through Indian raids and bandit attacks," he said, "built to withstand sieges." Grant's men arrived at sunset. 10 riders in formation, led by a scarred man wearing a deputy's badge. They surrounded the building but made no immediate aggressive moves. "We know you're in there," the deputy called out. "Josiah Grant wants his property returned. No one gets hurt if you cooperate." Murphy answered from behind a steel-reinforced door. "This is neutral ground. Folks inside claim sanctuary. Sanctuary doesn't cover stolen property and kidnapping." Didn't see any kidnapping. Saw a woman helping a sick man to shelter. The standoff continued through the night. Grant's men maintained their positions while Murphy, Naomi, and the recovering Gideon waited inside. By dawn, it became clear the riders were prepared for a long siege. "They can wait us out," Murphy observed. "Got supplies, fresh horses, reinforcements coming." Naomi studied the situation from a back window. The trading post offered protection, but also imprisonment. Grant's men controlled every escape route except one her father had mentioned years ago. "There's an old mine shaft behind the building," she told Murphy. Does it connect to anything? Abandoned silver claim. Tunnels run for miles underground, most of them flooded or collapsed. But some are passable. Maybe. Wouldn't recommend it. Easy to get lost down there, or worse. Gideon stirred from his fever-induced sleep. His color had improved, but he remained weak. What's the situation? Surrounded. 10 men outside. More coming. Naomi showed him a rough sketch of the trading post's layout. Murphy says there are mine tunnels, but they're dangerous. How dangerous? Murphy pulled out a mining survey from 1863. The tunnel system extended north toward the territorial road, with multiple exits scattered across 5 miles of desert. Main shaft goes down 50 feet, then splits into 3 branches. Eastern branch collapsed in '67. Western branch floods during monsoon season. Northern branch might be clear, but it hasn't been explored in years. Where does the northern branch exit? Near Willow Creek, about 3 miles from the main road. You could reach the territorial capital in 2 days from there. Gideon studied the survey with professional interest. His military engineering background helped him assess structural stability and navigation challenges. It's possible, he concluded. Risky, but possible. I'll go first, Naomi said. Scout the route. Mark safe passages. You're not going alone. You can barely stand up. Before Gideon could object, Murphy cleared his throat. Got a visitor you might want to see. Through the back window, they observed a single rider approaching under a white flag. Not one of Grant's men, but Sheriff Timmons himself. He dismounted and walked slowly toward the trading post. I need to talk to the folks inside, Timmons called out. Official business. Murphy opened the door cautiously. Timmons entered alone, hands visible and empty. Interesting situation you've got here, the sheriff said, studying Naomi and Gideon. Josiah Grant claims you kidnapped his intended bride and stole valuable documents. Grant's lying, Naomi replied. Figured as much. Timmons removed his hat and sat down heavily. Been sheriff for 12 years, seen a lot of Grant's intended brides over that time. Amazing how many of them have accidents or disappear when they refuse his proposals. Gideon and Naomi exchanged glances. Timmons continued speaking in measured tones. Been keeping records of my own. Nothing official, you understand. Just personal observations about unusual deaths, suspicious accidents, families that leave town suddenly. He pulled out a small notebook filled with dates and names. Federal Marshal's been asking questions about territorial corruption. Seems Washington's concerned about mining rights being transferred through irregular means. Timmons met Naomi's eyes. Might be interested in any documentation that supports their investigation. You're working with federal authorities? For 6 months now. Gathering evidence, building cases, waiting for the right moment to act. Timmons stood up. That moment might be now, if you've got proof of Grant's operations. Naomi retrieved her father's satchel. 3 years of meticulous documentation spilled across Murphy's table. Timmons examined the papers with growing amazement. This is everything we need, he said finally. More than enough to bring federal charges. What about Grant's men outside? That's where things get interesting. Timmons smiled grimly. Federal Marshal's riding this way with a full detachment. Should arrive by noon tomorrow. Hope flickered in Gideon's exhausted features. So we wait? You wait. I'm going to have a conversation with Deputy Carson and his boys about interfering with federal investigations. The federal marshal arrived with 20 men in blue uniforms. Marshal William Hayes dismounted outside the trading post while his soldiers took positions around Grant's crew. Deputy Carson and his men found themselves suddenly outnumbered and outgunned. Afternoon, Carson, Hayes said pleasantly. Interesting place for a social gathering. Carson's scarred face twitched. Official business, Marshal. Pursuing kidnapping suspects. Funny thing about that, I've been investigating Josiah Grant's business practices for the territorial government. Haven't found any reports of kidnapping in my files. Inside the trading post, Naomi watched the confrontation through a gap in the window boards. Gideon had recovered enough strength to stand, though he still leaned heavily against the wall. Think this is over? He asked. Not yet. Grant's not here personally. He'll have an escape plan. Marshal Hayes entered the trading post with 2 soldiers flanking him. Sheriff Timmons made introductions and explained the situation. Hayes examined Naomi's documentation with the methodical attention of an experienced investigator. 3 years of evidence, he said finally. Fraud, extortion, intimidation, murder. This is enough to hang Grant 10 times over. Where is he? Naomi asked. Holed up at his ranch with 30 armed men. Seems to think his money and influence will protect him from federal jurisdiction. Hayes rolled up the survey maps. He's wrong. The plan was simple. Hayes would return to town with the evidence and prepare arrest warrants. His soldiers would escort Naomi and Gideon to the territorial capital for their safety. Grant's empire would crumble through legal process rather than gunfights. But Josiah Grant had other ideas. The attack came at dawn, just as the federal escort prepared to leave. 50 mounted men charged the trading post from 3 directions. Grant rode at the front, his massive frame unmistakable, even at distance. He's making his final play, Hayes observed grimly. Kill the witnesses, destroy the evidence, claim we attacked him first. Murphy's reinforced walls absorbed the first assault. Rifle fire echoed across the desert as federal soldiers returned fire from defensive positions. Grant's men circled the building like wolves, probing for weaknesses. They can't breach the walls, Gideon said, but they can starve us out or burn us out. Grant won't use fire, Naomi replied. He needs my father's documents intact. They're the only proof of what he's stolen. She was right. Grant's men avoided incendiary attacks, focusing instead on suppressing return fire and tightening their siege. The cattle baron himself dismounted and approached under a white flag. I want to talk to the woman, he shouted. Hayes and his men covered Naomi as she stepped outside. This was her first face-to-face encounter with Grant since escaping his compound. The man was even more imposing up close, with cold eyes that missed nothing. You've caused me considerable trouble, Miss Baines. Good. Your father was a stubborn man, too. Look how that ended for him. Naomi felt rage building in her chest, but kept her voice steady. You murdered him for a mining claim. I killed him because he threatened my business interests, just like I'm about to kill you. In front of a federal marshal and 20 witnesses? Grant's smile was predatory. Tragic firefight during the pursuit of dangerous criminals. You shot first, naturally. Self-defense. The evidence against you is already in federal hands. Killing me won't change that. Evidence can be destroyed. Witnesses can be silenced. Federal marshals can have accidents on long rides through hostile territory. The conversation revealed Grant's desperation. His empire depended on maintaining the facade of legitimacy. Federal investigation would expose everything, destroy decades of careful construction. Last chance, Grant said. Marry me. Legitimize my claim to your father's mine, and I might let your friend live. No. Then you've sentenced him to death. Grant returned to his men and gave hand signals. The siege intensified. Rifle fire poured into the trading post from all directions. Hayes coordinated the defense while Murphy distributed ammunition and medical supplies. How long can we hold? Gideon asked. Long enough, Hayes replied. I sent a rider to the territorial capital yesterday. Reinforcements are coming. But reinforcements were still hours away. Grant's men pressed closer, using the desert terrain for cover. Several federal soldiers were wounded in the crossfire. He's going to rush us, Murphy observed. Overwhelmed the position with superior numbers. Naomi watched Grant through the gun ports. The cattle baron was studying the trading post's defenses, calculating angles of attack and casualty ratios. His military bearing suggested professional experience. He knows what he's doing, she said. So do we, Hayes replied. This position is held against Apache war parties and Mexican bandits. It'll hold against Grant. The final assault came at noon. 30 men charged the trading post simultaneously, while 20 more provided covering fire. Grant led the attack personally, roaring commands and urging his men forward. Federal soldiers met them at the walls with disciplined volleys. The adobe construction absorbed bullets while defenders picked their targets carefully. Grant's men fell back after losing 8 men in the first rush. "Again!" Grant bellowed. "Take that building!" The second attack focused on the main door. Grant himself wielded a sledgehammer, smashing at Murphy's reinforced barriers while his men provided cover fire. Splinters flew as the door began to buckle. That's when the reinforcements arrived. 50 Federal cavalry crested the ridge behind Grant's position, sabers gleaming in the desert sun. The cattle baron's men found themselves caught between two forces, trapped in the open with nowhere to run. "Josiah Grant!" the cavalry commander's voice carried across the battlefield. "You're under arrest by order of the territorial government." Grant dropped his sledgehammer and reached for his gun. Federal soldiers poured from the trading post while cavalry charged from behind. The cattle baron's empire collapsed in a matter of minutes. When the shooting stopped, Grant knelt in the dust with his hands bound behind his back. His men were dead, captured, or scattered across the desert. "It's over," Marshal Hayes said simply. Naomi looked at the man who had terrorized the territory for years. Without his armed followers and corrupt officials, Grant appeared smaller somehow. Just another criminal facing justice. "My father's mine? Legally yours, along with compensation for every family Grant defrauded." Justice had triumphed through law rather than violence. 3 weeks after Grant's arrest, Naomi stood at the entrance to her father's silver mine. The territorial court had restored legal ownership, along with mineral rights, to 43 other properties Grant had stolen. Federal investigators estimated the total value at nearly $2 million. Gideon emerged from the mine shaft covered in dust, carrying a canvas bag heavy with ore samples. His strength had fully returned during the legal proceedings in the territorial capital. The desert ordeal had left him leaner but somehow steadier. "The eastern vein runs deeper than your father mapped," he reported. "Good quality silver, maybe the richest strike in Arizona territory. Enough to rebuild what Grant destroyed, enough to rebuild everything twice over." They rode back to town together, the bag of silver ore secured behind Gideon's saddle. The streets looked different now. Grant's men were gone, replaced by federal marshals maintaining order during the transition. Families were returning to reclaim their properties. New businesses were opening to serve the recovering community. At the territorial courthouse, Marshal Hayes presented Naomi with official documentation restoring her father's mine and clearing all fraudulent debts. The papers bore the governor's seal and federal authorization. 27 families will receive full compensation, Hayes explained. Properties, livestock, equipment, everything Grant stole through illegal loans. What about the families he drove out completely? "We're tracking them down. The Hendersons are already on their way back from Tucson. The Williams family received word in California yesterday." Naomi signed the legal documents with the same careful precision she'd used to document Grant's crimes. Her father's training in surveying and land law had prepared her for this moment, though neither of them had imagined the circumstances. "There's something else," Hayes continued. "The territorial government wants to hire you as an official surveyor. Your documentation skills helped break the biggest fraud case in territorial history." The offer was generous. Regular salary, federal backing, authority to investigate land disputes across Arizona territory. It represented security, respect, official recognition of her abilities. "I need time to consider it." Hayes nodded understanding. "Take all the time you need. The position will remain open." Outside the courthouse, Sheriff Timmons waited with news about Grant's trial. The cattle baron faced federal charges in 3 territories. His network of corrupt officials was being systematically exposed and prosecuted. "He'll hang," Timmons said simply. "Maybe not for your father's murder specifically, but for everything else. Justice one way or another." That evening, Naomi and Gideon held their traditional meeting on the porch of her father's house. She'd reclaimed the property along with the mine, though repairs were needed after Grant's men had searched it repeatedly. "Morning planning session," she said with a slight smile. They discussed practical matters, mine operations, equipment purchases, hiring decisions. The silver strike would require experienced miners and proper machinery. Gideon's ranch could provide food and supplies for the workers. "Partnership?" he asked. "Partnership," Their business relationship had evolved naturally during the legal proceedings. His knowledge of the country complemented her technical expertise. His contacts among local ranchers balanced her connections to territorial authorities. The noon meeting covered broader plans. With Grant's empire dismantled, the region needed new leadership, honest businesses, fair employment, legitimate development of mineral resources. Naomi's documentation had revealed the true wealth of Arizona territory. "We could build something good here," Gideon said, "something that helps people instead of crushing them." My father would have liked that. The evening session was different. They sat closer together on the porch steps, watching sunset paint the desert in shades of gold and red. The conversation turned from business to personal matters. "The territorial surveyor position," Naomi said. "It's what my father always wanted for me. Official recognition, real authority. But it would mean traveling constantly, investigating disputes across 3 territories, living out of saddlebags and hotel rooms." Gideon waited for her to continue. "I've been running for so long," she said finally. "From Grant, from the past, from everything that happened to my father. Maybe it's time to stop running. And do what? Build something here. The mine, the community, a life worth having." She turned to face him directly. The question she'd been avoiding for weeks needed to be asked. "What about us?" Gideon had been wondering the same thing. Their partnership worked professionally, but something deeper had developed during their shared ordeal. Mutual respect had grown into affection into something stronger. "I love you," he said simply. "Not because I saved you, not because you saved me, because of who you are." A black woman with a silver mine and a reputation for causing trouble? A brilliant woman who fights for justice and never gives up. 3 days later, they were married in a simple ceremony at the territorial courthouse. Marshal Hayes served as witness, Sheriff Timmons provided the rings, and Doc Fletcher pronounced them officially wed under territorial law. The wedding reception was held at Murphy's Trading Post, now expanded into a proper inn. The guest list included returned families, federal officials, and townspeople who'd found courage to support justice over convenience. 3 times a day, Naomi said during their first dance. "Morning, noon, and night," Gideon agreed. But the meaning had changed completely. Morning meant planning their shared future. Noon meant working together toward common goals. Night meant quiet moments of contentment and love. Within 6 months, their combined operation employed 40 people. The silver mine provided raw materials while the ranch supplied food and livestock. Naomi established a school for miners' children, teaching reading and mathematics. Gideon organized a territorial guard unit to protect against future threats. They built exactly what her father had dreamed of, a community based on fairness, opportunity, and mutual respect, a place where hard work was rewarded and justice prevailed over corruption. Every evening, they met on their porch to watch the sunset and plan tomorrow's possibilities. The promise made in desperation had become a foundation for lasting happiness. The desert bloomed around them, rich with silver and hope.